Over the past month or so, I've been replaying Sonic Heroes and Sonic Riders, which are games that I have a very long history with. I'd been familiar with these games since I was a kid, and I spent a lot of time on them back then. However, whatever spurred me on to play them again seemed to have gotten me curious about another game from this era, Shadow the Hedgehog. As a kid, I definitely owned this game, and I have a lot of memories of playing it a fair amount and never really thinking much of it, especially compared to Heroes, which I adored. We got it from GameStop, and it was one of those games where they didn't have the box that it came in, so the disc was kept in a yellow manila envelope. Anyone remember those? Does GameStop still use those? Anyway, the thing about Shadow is that even though I played it a bit as a kid, I never actually beat it. My family never had a GameCube memory card, so in order to progress in any game, I'd have to leave my Nintendo Wii on over multiple days, and I did this for Shadow to marathon the game and beat every final stage, because I figured there was some last story you could unlock like in Sonic Heroes. When it didn't unlock after I was done, I just gave up and went back to playing Heroes. Little did I know, I was right. I had only just done half the work. After finishing an expert mode run recently, I was inspired to finally buckle down and complete the game, and it was an experience for sure. I'm usually pretty firm with my opinions on Sonic games, but this one left me feeling all kinds of ways. There were things I liked, things I admired, things I hated, and I felt it would be fun to talk about all this. So here's a video encapsulating my personal thoughts on Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow the Hedgehog was released in 2005, coming out on every 6th generation home console, but not getting a PC release like Heroes and Sonic Adventure DX did. Shadow at this point had only recently come back from his quote-unquote death in Sonic Adventure 2, and his own game focuses, or at least tries to focus, on expanding his backstory a bit. The game's story has two primary plot threads. 1. Shadow has amnesia and can't remember anything about his past. 2. A race of aliens known as the Black Arms launch an invasion onto Earth, with their leader Black Doom goading Shadow into collecting the Chaos Emeralds and delivering them to him with the promise of revealing Shadow's past if he does so. That's where things get interesting. Shadow the Hedgehog's story can play out in multiple ways depending on the actions you take. Each stage has multiple missions, and completing different missions will change what direction the narrative goes. The whole selling point here is that you can decide whether Shadow allies with the Black Arms as a villain or chooses to fight them and protect the Earth. Or you can remain neutral, which is ridiculous in its own right. Doing so will continue off the stinger from Team Dark's ending in Sonic Heroes, where Rouge discovers a room full of Shadow clones, causing her to question if the Shadow she teamed up with was the one from SA2. Here, Shadow confronts Eggman under the belief that he actually is an android, which is a little silly, because the Shadow androids are machines with rocket arms, and Shadow is presumably a biological creature with regular arms, so what's the deal here? Shadow's story is told in a way I find very strange, because while you can reach any of the endings in numerous different ways, the story being told might not always fit with the ending that you go for. The hero ending of the semi-dark final stage, Black Comet, is a perfect example. To get this ending, I took what I would consider to be the most straightforward path possible, like do the dark mission for Westopolis and then go normal the rest of the way, a path called Subjugation in Black according to the game. The story unfolds with Shadow deciding to side with the Black Arms, but then collecting the last emerald on his own in Air Fleet instead of doing what Black Doom ordered, and then heading to the Black Comet on Black Doom's orders. I was under the impression that what was being alluded to was Shadow pretending to be allies with the Black Arms, and the hero mission ending with him betraying Black Doom and making that apparent. Instead, you randomly fight Robotnik at the end, and the story concludes with Shadow declaring, "No one can tell me what to do," before bonking the Doctor on the head, with no further appearance from Black Doom. The problem is that many stages have cutscenes that play before and after you enter and leave them, and these cutscenes don't always line up with your actions in the stages. One of the playthroughs I did as a bit of a sample had a path that went as follows: Westopolis, Digital Circuit, Cryptic Castle, The Doom, Iron Jungle, Lava Shelter. The Doom is a flashback stage where Black Doom tries to stoke Shadow's anger towards humanity, obviously leading towards the dark and semi-dark final stages. However, if you do the hero mission for this stage, then you go to Iron Jungle, starting up the Shadow Android plot and completely abandoning Black Doom entirely if you do the stage's normal mission. It's so weird, but I'm hesitant to use this as a catch-all criticism for Shadow's story as a whole because there's so many pathways, 326 in total. Do all 326 pathways have a coherent story to get to one of the 10 endings? I don't know, but I have a hard time believing that they do. Of course, none of this really matters because the game has a last story that is presumably meant to be the definitive ending and has Shadow playing the hero anyway. Kind of a weird choice since it pretty much renders 9 out of the game's 10 potential endings completely irrelevant, a choice made even stranger by the fact that you need to obtain all these endings to actually unlock the last story. Anyways, the endings for the Dark final stage, GUN Fortress, are a little more sensible since Eggman doesn't randomly pop up as the final boss of the hero pathway. Black Doom's involvement as an ally inclines me to talk about him here. I still don't know what to think of this guy. He's voiced by Sean Schemmel, who is most known for being the English voice of Mad Dog in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I think it's cool how his plan to swing Shadow to his side involves manipulating him through showing visions of his past. It's just a shame that the pathways where this part of his character is most prominent end with Shadow allying with him anyway. In the more heroic routes, he's a pretty generic villain. His whole thing is that he really resents humanity's greed and affinity for betraying their own kind, and considers his plan to use them essentially as livestock to be merciful. Why this shit bothers him so much in the first place that he decided to help Gerald in exchange for furthering this plan, I couldn't really tell you. I do like how the hero ending for the Dark final stage GUN Fortress has Shadow just going full unhinged after betraying Black Doom and deciding to take over the universe himself. Eggman is also fairly involved in the plot, but I kinda wish they did more with him outside the Shadow Android bullshit. There's a cutscene preceding the stage Sky Troops where Eggman decides to mobilize his army against the Black Arms to stop them from destroying the city he wants to subjugate. I think it would have been cool if the story involved him teaming up with GUN to achieve this, but this scuffle is mostly contained within this single stage. The rest of the supporting cast are also surprisingly uninvolved. The entire playable cast from Heroes are present and appear in stages, but in the story, none of them really do much. The exceptions are Sonic, who's pretty involved in many of the stages leading up to the Hero final stage, and I do like how friendly he attempts to be with Shadow throughout the cutscenes and how Shadow is just not having that shit.
What's up, Shadow?
Not you again.
I also really love his involvement in the Hero final stage's Dark ending. Instead of having Shadow abruptly change alliances after nearly taking down Black Doom, this ending basically has Shadow deciding that he just wants to fight Sonic and prove his superiority. Straight up saying, before we end this invasion, I want to throw hands. Love it. The Chaotix also surprisingly do a lot in this story for some reason. The others don't really do anything other than accompanying you in the stages and being insanely annoying by means of constantly pointing out how to progress even when it's painfully obvious and scolding you for killing enemies of their allegiance, even when it's required to progress.
Take off first. Looks like homing attacks on those robots is the only way past. Stop!
A big problem here is that there isn't anything resembling a real morality system, so even on routes where Shadow goes down the road of evil, characters hardly react like he did. Going back to GUN Fortress, this is like the worst scenario for humanity. Shadow has allied fully with Black Doom and the Black Arms have cornered GUN at their final stronghold. The partner character for this stage's hero mission is Rouge, and upon meeting her, she immediately asks Shadow to help her secure a Chaos Emerald, not even acknowledging that Shadow is the reason things are so dire for the good guys. The only ending that personally really moves me, or makes me feel anything, is the semi-hero endings taking place on Cosmic Fall. Prior to this stage, there's a cutscene involving the GUN commander. Yeah, I guess I gotta talk about this schmuck. I believe he's only referred to as GUN Commander or Commander, and later media gave him the name Abraham Tower. His whole thing is that he has a vendetta against Shadow. He was a child on the Ark 50 years ago, witnessed Shadow's creation, and blames Shadow for the deaths of Maria and his family. All the while, it's never addressed once that this guy is the commander of GUN, the people who gunned down his best friend. Sure thing, man. Anyway, after Shadow humbles him, he heads off to uncover the truth. If you do the Dark mission, then you fight Eggman, and after defeating him, Shadow decides to stay on the Ark as its protector. If you do the Hero mission, Black Doom reveals his involvement in Shadow's creation, and after the boss fight you get this cutscene that I'm gonna play in full.
Finally, I've got all the Chaos Emeralds.
Shadow. This isn't over yet. The Black Arms will rise again.
I am Shadow the Hedgehog, a research experiment gone deadly wrong. I've caused so much destruction. I should never have been created. This is who I am.
Hey, don't go there! Yet, things may not be what they seem. You could be.
Now look, I don't know if it's the piano music or just my own depression, but this legit is a very moving scene, and Shadow's sadness is pretty palpable. Thing is, this feels like it should be a chapter in the story, not a conclusion. That kind of wraps around my problems with this plot as a whole. If this story feels disjointed, then that's primarily the result of the way that the game's campaign is structured. Shadow the Hedgehog has 22 normal stages, with a 23rd one that's exclusive to the last story, but a single playthrough of the story mode only has you travel through 6 stages. My question is, why? With this series, I try to at least appreciate or understand the decisions that the developers make, no matter how questionable I find them, but I just cannot wrap my head around what the benefit of this was supposed to be, as opposed to just making a campaign where you play all 23 stages and writing one story around it. Watching Shadow do a silly evil laugh in the dark endings just doesn't do it for me, unfortunately. There are moments here that are genuinely good, but it all gets lost in the sea of tedium and strange writing choices created by this odd choose-your-own-adventure format. It also would have been nice to see characters like the aforementioned GUN commander get fleshed out, because as it stands, this is just a weird way to present a story, and it hurts the experience as a whole. Anyways, let's get into the game itself. Like I said before, Shadow the Hedgehog is mainly a mission-based game, basically an expanded version of Team Chaotix's campaign in Sonic Heroes. Generally, most stages have 3 missions. Some have 2, but the idea is that whichever mission you complete will decide the next stage you go to until you eventually reach one of the 5 final stages, upon which your mission choice decides what ending you get. Nearly every stage has a mission that involves simply getting to the goal ring, alongside 2 other objectives. The one you'll end up getting the most familiar with are the ones that require you to kill a certain amount of enemies. The devs really liked this one because nearly half the game's stages have at least one mission that requires you to mow down enemies of a specific faction. Some have 2, and yeah, it's pretty tedious. Having to destroy objects is one thing, but these just have no sort of pace because enemies in this game have health bars, so taking everything out usually causes the level to drag. Still, there's always other objectives you end up doing throughout the stages. One that I find myself enjoying a surprising amount is when there's a vehicle you have to pursue throughout the stage before it escapes, mostly because it's really fun to fill up your hero or dark meter and then just unload on the things. These meters will give you access to Chaos Blast and Chaos Control once they're full, but these benefits are completely overshadowed by the fact that you have infinite ammo at the same time. Probably the biggest praise I can lobby towards Shadow the Hedgehog in its strongest moments is the level design, and more specifically, the way that the mission system is used to create a large amount of variance in the paths that you can take to complete a stage. The levels that are the most fun in this game, in my opinion, are the ones that truly take advantage of the mission system, so it feels like every mission is a different experience. An instance where this is done really well is Lava Shelter, one of the game's final stages. The dark mission for this stage requires you to activate these defense systems, and every time you activate one it causes the magma in the stage to rise, which actually alters the level design to create new hazards. By the end of the mission, you're pretty much forced into a completely different area of the stage compared to the hero mission, which is really sick and totally changes how you have to navigate the 2 missions. Funny that Eggman ends up being the final boss of both endings, even though the dark mission is directly to his benefit. Another example that comes to mind is Space Gadget. This level has a gravity flipping gimmick not unlike Crazy Gadget in Sonic Adventure 2. If you do the hero or normal missions, it's a pretty standard affair. Where things start to get freaky is in the dark mission. You end up on an alternate pathway early in the stage that ends with Shadow having to navigate the rest of it on a completely different level. What were ceilings in the pathways taken on the hero mission become your floors, and it's really sick. I like how a lot of the enemies end up standing on the walls upside down or sideways because of all the gravity defiance. Coolest part is that even on this alternate route meant for the dark mission, you can still finish the normal and hero missions, so there's lots of variance on how you can complete this one, which is design I enjoy a lot in Sonic games. The only real problem I have with Space Gadget is the normal mission is time-gated for some reason. Both the hero and normal missions have the same objective, get to the goal ring. If you do this within 5 minutes, this counts as completing the hero mission, so if you want to do the normal mission but forget to wait until the timer ends, and then your path through the story gets fucked up. It's really annoying. Other stages might not go as crazy as these two do, but there's usually still some sort of alternate area. Westopolis and Digital Circuit, for example, both have areas that go past the goal ring, which I think is a really cool shakeup to conventional Sonic level design in this era. Cryptic Castle also has an alternate final area that's required for the Dark Mission, although admittedly it's a little boring since you spend most of it on the Black Hawk. One of the most unique stages in the game is Central City. This is, I believe, the only stage in the game with no goal ring. It's basically one large sandbox, which is a design I'm surprised the game didn't experiment with more. I think it might have inspired the 2-player mode anyway. To be honest, I like the concept for this stage more than the stage itself. It's pretty irritating to navigate because large portions of the level are flooded with toxic green goop, forcing you to either use these rockets that jettison you into the air and have you fall down slowly after, or use a vehicle. Shadow can commandeer these freely if you find one. Typically you'll find cars, but you can also gain access to these hovering saucers that can double jump. Unfortunately, the ground vehicles control like garbage, and Shadow generally moves way faster than they do, so they're not even very beneficial. There's promotional art of Shadow on a bike, and it's shown very prominently in the intro cinematic. This thing is present in a single stage out of the 23 in the game. What a scam. Central City also highlights a fairly ever-present problem with the level design, which is the amount of reused areas. Central City bears a clear visual resemblance to Westopolis, and there are some portions of the stages that are blatantly reused between the two. Now, these two stages have enough of their own gameplay differences that it's not a major problem, but they also aren't the only stages doing this. Take this section in Glyphic Canyon. There's a branching pathway. At the bottom is a slope leading downward to an area with enemies and a series of steps you must climb to progress. The other path has a shuttle loop. Now, peep this section in the stage Sky Troops, where there's a branching pathway. At the bottom is a slope downward to an area with enemies and a series of steps you must climb to progress. The other path has a shuttle loop. Might make you feel like you're experiencing deja vu, right? On top of that, and the general visual resemblance, both stages have these similar looking temple interior segments, an incline where pieces of broken pillars fall and roll toward you, and for some reason they basically also have the same mission where you activate these green jewels. It's the Dark Mission for Glyphic Canyon and the Hero Mission for Sky Troops. Black Comet and Final Haunt are also guilty of this, both visually and level design-wise, with multiple very similar sections between them, and the two Arc stages have this problem as well. Lost Impact and The Doom are both framed as flashbacks to Shadow's life on the Ark 50 years prior to the story, and The Doom in particular is heavily implied to take place during the GUN raid that resulted in Maria's death. Heavy stuff. These stages have a major issue with being way too big and having way too many areas that are hard to distinguish between, so it's easy to get lost. Lost Impact has probably the most infamous mission in the game, where you need to kill 35 artificial chaos, and honestly I think the real killer here is this one hidden in the corner during one of the gun lift sections. If you don't know he's there, then this stage will have you pulling your hair looking for it, while that 34 out of 35 just taunts you. Now, to be fair to Shadow, it's not the only game to do this. Even for characters with different gameplay styles, many stages in Sonic Adventure 2 had shared backgrounds, textures, and overall aesthetics. Mission Street and Radical Highway and Skyrail and Pumpkin Hill are the examples that come to my mind first. The difference that makes what Shadow does feel more egregious, ignoring that SA2 didn't often have repeated chunks of level design, is that in Shadow it's completely realistic to have a playthrough where you go through multiple of these identical stages, which can make it feel a bit lazy that they did this. If you do a pure neutral run where you only do normal missions to get to Lava Shelter, Glyphic Canyon and Sky Troops are within 2 stages of each other. I get that some of these stages are meant to take place in the same location as one another, but surely with something like an alien home base, Black Comet and Final Haunt could have been made to feel a bit more distinct from each other. In spite of all this, I think my least favorite stage overall is Mad Matrix, because the Dark Mission is the worst one in the game. This stage and Digital Circuit have these lightspeed trails that Shadow must travel along. In the Hero and Normal missions, you're mostly using them to get from one tower to the other, but Mad Matrix's Dark Mission tasks you with destroying 30 bombs that are on the circuits. That's it. Outside of the first area, you hardly partake in any conventional gameplay. Might be one of the most boring things I've ever done in a Sonic game. You can legit get this done with a single hand, and hunting the bombs themselves is very annoying because of the confusing layout. Unless you have this entire circuit memorized, prepare to be here a long time, because there's no radar or map. Generally, the items you need to find or destroy are usually laid out in a way that makes them pretty easy to find, but not here, and yeah, it sucks. The boss fights are another thing entirely. No matter what path you take, you're guaranteed to fight at least one, since every final stage has a boss fight. There are 3 potential final bosses, Sonic and Diablon, Black Doom, and the Egg Dealer, who has 4 fights while the other 2 have 3 fights each. Sonic and Diablon are fine, but I really dislike the Egg Dealer. Besides how out of nowhere it feels in the 2 instances outside of Lava Shelter where you fight him, it's insanely boring. The concept of this boss having a slot machine that he and Shadow can influence the outcome of is cool, but the execution is not interesting at all because there's literally never any threat of Eggman pulling down all 3 slots before you do. It's just a punching bag that you have to spend way too much time chasing down. There are some other fights you can run into. The Black Bull is a pretty whatever fight in Lethal Highway and Death Ruins, but the Egg Breaker is notable purely for his meme-worthy status.
You know what they say, the more the merrier.
Yeah, he says that a lot. You fight this thing in 3 stages, and I guess to the game's credit, all 3 fights are fairly distinct from one another. It also looks like someone wanted to turn the Egg Emperor into a Fisher-Price toy. The other 2 fights are the Heavy Dog and the Blue Falcon, which have a pretty nifty gimmick. When you attack these things, their weapons fall off, and Shadow can grab them, allowing you to just destroy them with rockets. It's surprisingly fun. The last story features a fight against Devil Doom, a boss that looks really ridiculous, but it's cool being able to use the Chaos Spear as a weapon. Speaking of weapons, these are sort of the defining mechanic. I know that these are controversial in of themselves, and I truthfully don't mind it a ton, but with a game like this taking on such a dark tone, it does take you out of it just a little to see Shadow running around with an oversized Gatling gun. Despite this, it's surprisingly well implemented. I like how many different types of weapons there are. GUN soldiers drop stuff like pistols, assault rifles, and submachine guns, while the Black Arms and Egg Pawns have their own types of weapons that fit their aesthetic. Some of the alien weapons are really sick, especially the ones you get from elite soldiers that only appear in the Black Comet stages. Funnily enough though, even though I said that it kinda clashes with the tone, my favorite weapon is definitely the Gatling gun. This thing just wrecks shit. There's also melee weapons, but these are pretty ineffective, though I do like how you can obtain them by breaking environmental objects. Then we have the Shadow Crates, a great idea for the way this game is structured. On your very first playthrough, breaking this thing will spawn a generic weapon. However, for every ending you obtain, the game will reward you with one of 5 special weapons, and you can power them up to increase their ammo capacity. These are all really cool. The Satellite Gun, the Samurai Blade, the Omochao Gun, they're all super fun to use, and they offer a nice tinge of variety when replaying stages you may have previously completed. My favorite is the Vacuum Gun, which sucks up small enemies and rewards extra lives when its ammo is depleted. Finishing the last story unlocks the Shadow Rifle, the strongest weapon in the game. It wrecks shit, so it's good for many missions if you're hunting A ranks. I like the guns from a gameplay standpoint, but it does sort of feel like they came at the cost of Shadow's own combat capabilities. The homing attack feels incredibly weak and sluggish here, and it's all because this game retains Hero's design choice of giving enemies health. In general, I think there's massive issues with the way Shadow controls. He's very fast, but at top speed he feels heavy and hard to steer. It's very easy to run into obstacles. Even in areas that are linear and clearly want you to barrel through, it's hard getting to do that without some sort of problem. Spin dashing also feels worthless. You hardly gain any speed or distance even with canceling into a jump, so the spin dash jump, a previously reliable way of crossing distances fast in the adventure games, doesn't do much for you here. If I were to nail down the biggest issue with this game, it would be repetition. I brought this up when talking about the story, but the need to complete 10 playthroughs seeps into the gameplay and festers into an immense amount of tedium. It's downright exhausting having to replay stages multiple times. Even when you take quirky routes to avoid playing the same stages, you still run into this problem because every final stage needs to be completed twice. Westopolis is the biggest offender because its role as the first stage is set in stone. You can't skip it. To be honest, I do think it's a cool level. Compared to most other Sonic games where the first stage is pretty chill, Westopolis is very chaotic. The constant lasers raining down, the buildings falling in the background, and the enemies attacking you regardless of your chosen allegiance adds to the very hectic feeling. It's a fun romp on your first time, and even your second. By the 10th, the appeal begins to wither in the face of how tired you get doing the same missions in this stage over and over again. Again, I just don't understand why the game was designed this way. In my opinion, it only hurts the experience as a whole. I think there's a ton of things to appreciate in Shadow, especially in the individual levels, but it all just gets sullied by how much of a chore this game feels to finish. This is not a unique flaw to Shadow by any means. Sonic Unleashed, a game I wholeheartedly love, has a problem like this. Just going back and replaying stages in that game is a blast. Doing a full playthrough of the campaign, though, is annoying, because I end up having to deal with aspects of the game I personally don't care for, like the EXP system and the sun and moon medal hunting. Shadow, though, has this worse than any other Sonic game I've played, I think. It's completely attention span slaughtering. I didn't even think this could be a problem in a game where every stage has multiple missions, but the problem I had was the frequency of both replaying the same stages and the same missions in those stages. Maybe I'm just doing something wrong, but no matter the amount of praise I can give to individual levels in this game and the many clever uses of the mission system, it just falls apart because fully completing the game is tiring. I am aware of the existence of Expert Mode, which basically turns the game into what I said I'd prefer it to be, a full linear stage-by-stage run, but you have to fucking A-rank every stage in the game to unlock it in the first place, and who is doing that? So do I think Shadow the Hedgehog is a bad game? Yes. But it's not the worst thing ever. Like I said, there's a lot to appreciate here in the way that these stages and missions were designed. It feels like such a catch-22 though, because even though the creative uses of the mission system in the level design are one of the best things about the game, that same mission system only exists because of the game's structure, which also enables the biggest problems I had with the whole thing. Maybe this could have worked better if certain stages were made exclusive to pathways so that you wouldn't have to constantly replay them, but at the end of the day, what they did just doesn't work for me. Still, there's a lot about this game that I really like, but fuck, I just wish it wasn't such a goddamn chore to finish. Oh well. At the end of the day, I still enjoyed myself for the most part, and I'm glad I finally went back to finish this game. Considering the success of Shadow Generations, I imagine Shadow's gonna get a lot more spotlight moving forward, so if another entry in the series decides to explore similar themes and mechanics to the 05 game, I'm hoping they learn from the mistakes they made. Also, now that I finally finished Shadow the Hedgehog, I'm even more annoyed about Shadow Generations' final stage being Radical Highway. It totally should have been Black Comet.